Welcome to Youth Diversion's webinar on digital parenting in the age of COVID-19. My name is Joanna Conrad, and joining me today is Kevin Cosgrove, an IT specialist. Today we're going to be discussing Parental Controls 101 and demystifying some of the concerns that parents have with respect to accessing devices and really getting hands-on with how to protect their kids from some of the dangers online. So let's talk about customizable filtering and blocking.
Whether you're using software or you're using hardware, a hardware device for monitoring, the customizable part, they usually come with their own set of filters. General terms that parents might want blocked on the internet or certain websites that are already known to be dangerous to just about everybody. They'll come with a pre-confined set of filters that will work automatically. You should be able to get in there and put in your own terms, because the blanket approach is just the start. You want to have your own, depending on the issues that you might be having with your child, or depending on the age of your child. Just a blanket filtering rule provided automatically may not be suitable, so you want to be able to tailor that to fit whatever your actual family needs are.
Can you give us an example of what that might look like?
For example, if there was specific websites or even specific services that you did not want your children on, and as I just mentioned, the majority of these things, it's going to be different for every family situation and different for every kid. Really, it has a lot to do with their age and responsibility level, and the parent is usually the best judge of what that is going to be. So just taking the blanket ones from the company, they might be helpful, or it might be a good start to kind of get a learning curve out of the way. But once you notice there's certain apps or certain services or websites or even games that you don't want your household involved with, you can set up those filters afterwards, after you kind of get over that learning curve.
Well, and I think it's important to say too that when it comes to filters and putting in various protective measures, at the end of the day, kids also know how to get around them, right?
Absolutely. All of this stuff that you can do online or do with your own router or add in some parental control software, those should be augmenting what you're doing already with your children. It shouldn't be the first and only defense that you have. Communication, a lot of these companies that develop these softwares and develop these programs to help with the monitoring, they work with other parents, they work with psychologists, they work with law enforcement. They get an idea that, you know, the communication before this stuff starts is really where the key is. So this should be added to the family program. And like I said before, it definitely needs to be tailored to the age and different maturity levels or responsibility levels that you have with the different children. So the filtering that's available and the level that you need to go to, that's the parent is going to be the best one to make the decision of what's going to be appropriate. There's a lot of different software packages available that you can buy, like NetNanny or Norton Family. They offer different levels, and you have to take a look at what the features are and see if that's what's needed for what you're looking to accomplish. So it may seem overwhelming. You could have parental control routers. You can have your own router with time settings on it. You can have extra software. You can rely on services that come with Apple devices or come with Google devices. Each one of these things offers different and varying levels of protection for either the person using the device or for the internet usage out of the house. What you need to do to make it so it's not so daunting, the amount of stuff that's available, is sit down beforehand and figure out what your goals are of stuff that you actually do want filtered. If it's just a matter of you just want certain websites that aren't allowed, or you just want to schedule for after 11 p.m. or during homework time, the router shuts off, you can set those things, and most times just your router is going to end up being sufficient. But if you need to get into the point of checking their SMS messages or checking email for content or different websites, because the name of a website doesn't always have any indication about what the content is of the website. So you want something that's going to actively filter and look at the content, not just certain keywords.
So when we're talking about filtering and putting in preventative measures, when it comes to these websites, some of them like Pornhub.com, for example, have bought out different domains, if I'm correct, right? So that if a child erroneously spells Pornhub.com and maybe just misspells it, saying, Pornhud.com, they will still be directed to that website. So just again to indicate that it is not foolproof, and some kids may be aware of that and other kids may not, and just be, typing in a website, even maybe just out of curiosity or by mistake, and they may very well be directed to a site that you clearly put in to be blocked. But again, different websites buy the domains so that the traffic is directed to them regardless.
Yeah, that's absolutely a big problem with the companies that sit on those misspelled websites as well. Sometimes it's used by hackers. If you accidentally type in Google wrong, you'll end up at a hacking web page. But you're right, with certain websites that you want to whitelist or blacklist out of your security settings, if that's all that you're relying on, there's many ways to bypass that. Like you said, instead of Pornhub, you type in Pornhut, it looks at it and redirects you over to Pornhub, and off you go. So if you're just relying on just a blacklist of stuff that's not allowed, you're going to be spending way too much administration time constantly chasing and adding and putting in more and more websites, where if you bought a different product that would filter the content instead of just a single word or a single address, then you're going to be a lot better off, because it can proactively look at the content there and decide whether that website should be blocked or not. So the blacklist and whitelist are okay, but I would say those are very limited.
Is there one that you would say is the best bet for parents to go to? Is one that maybe one that you recommend the most?
There's some that I would recommend the most, but it's also dependent on the level of security that you're looking for. So if you're looking for a high level of control, you want to see what apps are being installed, what kind of chat programs are being accessed, even down to the point of accessing what is typed once you're in a chat area. If you need a higher level of control, programs like Norton Family or NetNanny are some of the two biggest ones. They're not that expensive, and most of these parental software, to make sure that you're getting a product that you actually need, most of them offer a free trial or a free month or a free few months. Right now, I know a few of them are offering a few extra free months because of our COVID situation. So they're actually offering free trials. And if it's a high level security, yeah, definitely I would say Norton Family or the NetNanny are probably two of the biggest ones. There's less expensive or less elaborate ones. But like I said, if you're looking for the most elaborate options, those are two of the probably biggest recognizable names that you can think of. It really depends on what the goal is before you even get the product of which one you can recommend. If all you want is, it's a younger kid, he's not going, or he or she is not going to be traveling anywhere without you. Grade school age kids, he's not going anywhere unless you're taking them. Then usually just parental controls within a router that can set the different times of day where the internet's not allowed. At that age, that's probably sufficient. You can have conversations about inappropriate content. As you get a little older, at preteen or teen, you might want to start monitoring a little bit more about any kind of chat programs or any applications that can access the camera, because of course that becomes a more and more of a danger as the kids get older, with any kinds of sexting or texting to strangers. You want to know what that information is. And again, as you get even into the older teens, you might want either let up some of the restrictions as they get older, give them a little more independence, or you may, because they can get into even bigger trouble, you may want to be even tighter. So it really depends on the level that you're looking for before you even go out and look for the products.
Okay, so let's talk about secondary filtering and blocking. Why is it important and what is it? I mean, when it comes to online searches, gaming, social media. We know that it's really important to provide various filters, whether it's to protect our own privacy or to protect one's digital footprint. Can you explain what all of that means? I mean, some of these are kind of tech-savvy words, and parents might be intimidated, like, what does that mean? I don't even want to go there. Can we break it down for parents? What does that mean?
And the first thing to break down for parents, we kind of touched on it on the last webinar, is, that's old myth that kids always know more about the computers than parents do. Working in the industry, I can definitely guarantee they do not know more than the parents do. They're more likely to seriously mess stuff up than a parent is. But there's still that underlying feeling that parents have that the kids can just run circles around them. So I can tell you one of the biggest things that the kids can do that parents aren't able to do is sit down in front of Google and type something in to be actually able to find the answers. Most people don't know a Google search, you can type in a plain English question and it will answer based on the question. So what is the best parenting filter? Or how do I access my brand of router? Or how do I blacklist websites? Or different things like that. It's just sitting down and typing it in a plainly worded question, Google will respond to it correctly. One of the comforting things about working in IT is with 7 billion people on the planet, there's other people doing stuff that you're doing. So whatever kind of answer you're looking for, whatever kind of question you have, there's a good chance that somebody's already asked those questions, and you're going to find out just a trove of information on the internet if you just sit down and take a look for some of this stuff. But as far as secondary filtering, some of the other terms that we might throw around, we'll provide a glossary and some terms so parents can understand what we're talking about. But the secondary filtering goes beyond just the blanket filtering that some of these devices might use. The preset filters of which websites not to allow, or preset times of when things are allowed. You want to have that secondary stuff where it goes a little bit further than just some blanket basic rules. You want to be able to monitor which apps they're actually using. Some of the parental control software, it will actually get down to the point of saying, okay, Snapchat is not allowed after 5 o'clock. That's a more advanced feature than just saying no internet. So you can get down and really fine tune what apps are actually doing. You can get into what social media is being used and whether it's allowed on a device or not allowed on a device. So the secondary filtering is really important because a lot of this stuff is about the, especially with younger kids, the communication that they're capable of on the internet. Whether it's in a chat room or a chat app or a chat platform like on a computer, you want to see who they're talking to and what they're actually saying. So the secondary filtering will actually allow you to see down to the point of what's being typed back and forth. Those are really, really important, of course, when you're dealing with any kids, that the amount of stuff they can get into. Like I said, we should tailor those applications to what's appropriate for your own family and appropriate for your kid and the level of control that you require on that.
An example of an app that offers that is MSN Messenger Kids. Parent has full access to see what that conversation looks like, which is great, especially if you have younger kids. And again, when we're talking about COVID-19 and social distancing, for the most part, kids really don't have an opportunity to connect with their friends in any other ways. I think it's important too for parents to sort of sit back and think about what it was like when they were younger, and maybe writing some of their innermost thoughts in a diary or a journal, or maybe whatever they had, and for a parent to go into their room and find that journal and read those things, obviously a violation of privacy and very upsetting, I'm sure, right? And parents have a difficult time corresponding that to social media, again, because it is public, and so if they're putting it out there, then why can't I see it as a parent? But it's different. Kids don't see it that way. For the most part, social media is an extension of their life and some of their friendships and some of the things that are going on. And even though it's out there for the public to see, they don't necessarily want the parents to see, right? Especially if they're having those chats and the direct messages and the private conversation. Not to say they're inappropriate, but maybe they're of intimate nature or whatever, and they just don't want the parents to see, which is understandable. So again, it's just finding that fine balance between having all of these resources at your disposal and implementing them, but also giving your kids some freedom to even make mistakes, right? I mean, that's how we learn too. So it's about having that communication in place so that kids know that if they do make a mistake or something does happen, they can come back and tell the parents about it.
Absolutely. The fact that a lot of these programs and platforms, when you're dealing with safety in children, a lot of them do involve psychiatrists and child psychiatrists, and families get involved. The applications and parental controls, I would love to push that as the first thing, because of course that's my industry. But honestly, it is about the parent and talking with the children. You should divulge to your kids that you are monitoring. Let them know at whatever age level there is. You let them know that you are taking a proactive stance in this. It's good if you can start this stuff when the children are younger, but sometimes you're kind of playing catch up and learning about this stuff afterwards. And it's not so easy. I have recommended to parents different applications, and I've had one come back to me. It was in specific to Norton Family. You can install it on all the apps that the kids use, and even when they're outside the home, that parental control continues. That's one of the reasons why I like that particular one. And Net Nanny is it's not just controlling your router in your house. When they leave the house, it still has those controls on the phone. So in recommending this to one of the parents, a couple days later, they came back and said, okay, what do I do now? I can't get my kid's phone to put this on it. It's like, well, that's because this application is an augment to parenting in the first place. So there's some counseling and discussions and things that need to be set up beforehand. Just coming out of the blue, trying to play catch up and taking your kid's phone and locking it down, it's probably going to backfire a lot of times. So you definitely want to have open conversation with your children about what you're monitoring. You can even set up different rules where they're allowed to earn extra privileges. If they're doing all their grades, they're getting everything done, they're doing their chores, all that kind of stuff, then they are allowed to use one of the chat apps. And you can slowly work your way into gaining a little more autonomy for them. Because of course with kids, that's going to be really, really important. No, you don't want to watch every single thing that your kid does on any chat app or email or stuff like that. They should have some degree of privacy. Where you want to be involved is, of course, whenever that might involve harm or getting into an inappropriate content or heading into a different direction as they mature and doing some socially unacceptable things with the internet. Those are the times that you want that, but to monitor every single bit of communication, it's going to add a definite level of stress to the family dynamics. With the monitoring what they're actually typing and everything else, like I said, you want to try to go with not just basic filtering provided from the application or from your router of just a blanket blacklist or a blanket whitelist. You want it to have some actual artificial intelligence and be able to filter stuff that's coming through.
So that brings us to time management features. When it comes to time management, is there anything that you recommend that a parent can use?
You can get all sorts of different products that already have some of the other parental features in it, and they will include time management. But depending on your family situation, if all you're looking for is time management, most of your home networking can actually take care of that on its own. Your home router, you can program just about any router that you can buy at the store for home use. You can program it to have different devices that are cut off at dinner time or cut off at 11 p.m. and don't start up again until 7 o'clock the next morning. So if only looking for time scheduling, then most routers, you won't have to spend extra money because you already own that hardware. If you're doing other applications and adding more stuff in, that scheduling will probably be included in just about any application that you look for. The one big problem that's on top of deciding what level of application you need or what level of monitoring you need, or some of these applications don't always work on every platform. So for example, if there is with the Google Home services or the Apple services or even the Microsoft services. They offer some really, really good parental control features, even reporting features. Certain apps aren't allowed to be bought off the Apple Store. There's maturity levels that you can set, so certain apps aren't allowed to be downloaded. The problem with some of those, whether it's Apple or Microsoft or Google or some of the other platforms, is those only work within that platform. So if you're doing something outside of Google or on another device that's not your Android phone or an Android tablet, that Google Home and Google Parental Controls are not going to be any use to you if they leave the house with their iPhone. So on top of just deciding what level you need, you also need to kind of decide what devices you need this to work on. Some of the devices actually get down to the level of if there's a PlayStation in the house, it will only be allowed on the internet at certain times. Or if there's a phone and it leaves the house, it's still controlled. All of those different things need to be considered. The Microsoft security works exceptionally well. Anything that's done within the Microsoft platform does get reported to the parent. Different applications, different websites, what they access, all those kinds of things are reported. But as soon as you step outside of the Microsoft environment, there's no controls available to you. So it really needs to be tailored down to not just what level of parental control you're looking for, but also what applications you actually want those to work on.
Would you say that there's any risks that are associated with instilling time management features like this? I mean, one that jumps off, off the top of my head is that forbidden fruit, right? That as soon as you start taking away or dangling the time that a kid can spend online, it all of a sudden becomes this thing that they are now trying to secretly maybe sneak around to get, right? Could that be an issue?
Certainly can be an issue, but as far as whether that's in the IT world or it's just within parenting in general, you're going to kind of end up with those situations in the first place. So proper counseling on how to put some of this stuff into place, getting advice from professionals. There's tons and tons of parenting websites that offer advice on how to slowly put these things in place. It is definitely going to be a larger problem with a older child, a teenager, and then this coming into play right away instead of it being something that's been built up for years. So there is ways that you can slowly integrate that stuff into the family dynamics. It definitely does involve conversation first. The problems with some of these things, it depends on the level that you're looking for again. If all you're looking for is when the child is at home and you want the internet to shut off on your phone at 11 p.m., yes, absolutely. When they leave the house, go to a friend's for a sleepover or whatever other scenario there is, their phone's going to be active and working on whatever Wi-Fi they hook up to. If that's a problem, you can start looking at parental control apps that will control the actual phone, not just control the Wi-Fi within your house. So it's something that has to be decided on before you even get into whichever parental control you're using, is what you want it to do, when you want it to actually do it, and what devices you want it to do it on.
And we also know even experts have come out recently with respect to the pandemic and said that screen time at this point really is not something that parents should be stressing about. We all know that kids are spending more time on their devices, in front of a TV, their iPad, whatever, because they're bored, right? They're home. There isn't as much for them to do. There isn't as much of an opportunity for them to go somewhere to a physical location to go play or do something, not to mention that they're not in school. So I know I've read a number of different reports that have said that, screen time at this point should really not be the central focus, but rather, what they're doing, the quality of the content that they're accessing. And yeah, perhaps, at some point looking at, well, you know what, maybe you've been on there for a couple hours, let's do something different. You can go back on in the afternoon.
I absolutely would agree with that. The quality of what they're doing and what they're involved in online is right now is a lot more important than the amount of time. Them being able to use social media, being able to chat with their friends, and all those kinds of things, even just having access to that, we should be looking at the kids that this is a form of social currency for them. When we were younger, it was, whoever had the coolest running shoes. If you didn't have the cool running shoes, you weren't one of the cool kids. Well, if you're monitoring, maintaining, and limiting so much, you're affecting their social currency in their world. To them, it's important. To us, it might seem trivial. We know that these things will pass as they get older and stuff like that. But to them, it is important. So you want to fit in um, procedures, rules, and guidance for the kids on what they should be doing, how long they should be doing it, those kinds of things. If they're doing a variety of things throughout the day, they've been on the internet for, let's say, 3-4 hours, but they've been chatting with their friends. They played a little game time. They did some homework time. They watched a documentary about how cool Kevin is. Whatever it might be, as long as it's diversifying and useful, even entertainment, just sitting there watching and just absorbing some movie or a game, that serves its role too. So that shouldn't really be downplayed, but without them being able to get out and do a lot of stuff with their friends. I have an older son, university level, and with him being in quarantine, he's making use of Netflix as a social application. So all of his friends all start up the movie at the same time, and then there's a chat window that opens up on the side, and they're all typing back and forth and chatting about the movie. So it can be a social thing as well as just an entertainment thing. Our job as parents is not just control, but it's also guidance. Let them know these things are available. We have the ability to sit down and, as a parent, kind of try to de-stress their home situation with everybody inside the house. We can look up different things that they can do, different websites that they can interact with, different chat programs. Um, Depending on the age of the child and depending on the home situation, with some of the chat programs and social media, some psychologists actually recommend that your kid have you as a friend on there, not necessarily to monitor everything you do, but to show them that you're not just the control scenario, or also guidance as well. And that's a big part of all this parental control. Isn't just about clamping down; it's getting them in the right direction too.
Right. And when we're talking about social media and controls, parents oftentimes don't necessarily know that every social media app has settings in place that they can go into and help their child understand how to set their settings to private so that their pictures can't be seen by everybody, that their location isn't accessible by others, and that sort of a thing. There are various guides out there. Again, Google can be your best friend to really understanding how to get comfortable with all of the different apps and the settings that are associated with them. But for the most part, they're pretty straightforward, right? And so parents can easily go into them. But again, with their child next to them, ideally, to explain, we're going to put this on private because we don't want everyone to see your photo, because this matters based on the perception that you might be putting out there. Who you are at 13 is not who you're going to be at 33, when maybe you're looking for a professional job and your employer can see some, inappropriate photos or, comments or whatever have you, right? So they don't maybe understand that that will follow them. We've seen a number of different NFL players and just athletes in general that are minutes or even seconds away from signing a huge contract, and then all of a sudden those contracts are taken away because of a comment that somehow surfaces from 9 years ago that was either racist or sexist in nature or whatever. So, parents need to sit with their kids and help them understand. But further to your point, when it comes to social currency, kids obviously want those likes, right? And in order to get likes, they need followers. And if their accounts are private, they may not get all the followers that they're looking for. So of course, again, it's finding that balance, and depending on the age of your child, whether you're comfortable with them having an open, whether it's a Facebook or Instagram, and really understanding what it is that they're posting, why they want to have, strangers following them.
All of the platforms whether it's, like you said, Snapchat or Facebook or Instagram, they do have all their privacy controls. So I definitely recommend parents to kind of get familiar with which ones is whatever the kids are using this week, and get familiar with what those settings are. They're not that difficult. If you take a look at them, you can see that most of the settings they're plainly worded on what they do. Whether a photo is private access or just friends that can see it, or all of those different types of settings that should be gone through. And I would even recommend sitting with your child while you go through those settings and have the conversation between them of what these are and what these mean, because this is an important thing to them. Their social currency and that they deal with. That's the world to some kids. I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's just a statement. But it is something that is important that parents do need to consider. So all of it does go back to conversation and having those conversations with your kids about what is appropriate or inappropriate. And the fact that with children, I've seen different reports from psychiatrists saying that the part of your brain that actually develops that gives you cause and consequence isn't even fully developed until you're 25 years old. So as you're trying to explain to them about the football player who lost the $12 million contract, it still isn't registering. They can hear you, they're listening, but cause and consequence doesn't really come until they're much older. So you do have to kind of take them by the hand and do some of this stuff for them, because they don't see it as being as important as what you see it as. And you got to have that level of conversation and guidance to get them there, so that once they are 20, 25 years old, they do understand that these things that happen when they're 16 aren't going to come back and haunt them. And the reason that it's not going to come back and haunt them is because they had you actively involved with them instead of just putting a blocking program on there.
Well, and I think we also have to remember that for the most part, just as when we were kids, everyone thinks they're invincible, right? And kids today are no different. So what they're doing online, they don't think it's going to come back and bite them in the butt later. And they're not thinking about their own potential, post-secondary institution denying them admission because of something that they posted when they're 13. Of course, they're not thinking that. They're thinking, I'm not going to get followed up on, or nothing that I post will be misconstrued or taken the wrong way, or whatever excuse they have in their head. So that's also something that comes part and parcel with that. And sometimes it's just a matter of us rewinding or trying to rewind to the best of our ability to when we were kids, except that when we were kids and our frame of mind, we didn't have these digital devices at our disposal, right? So it is different, and we're dealing with a far more serious situation, right? Because now these are young kids who think they're invincible, who think that they have the power of the world really at their fingertips. And I mean, they want control of that. And so what are they doing? And how can we best guard them in making some of those choices, right? Again, going back to that digital resiliency piece, in preparing them to make really good, healthy, sound decisions online to the best of their ability, given their cognitive ability at that time.
You definitely have to balance out the actual guidance and interaction that you have with your kids with whatever parental control solutions you're looking for. Don't rely on just one or the other on its own. Use them to augment what you're doing, but the conversations with your kids, and go through those settings, go through those apps, just give them that level of guidance, because they are going to dismiss whether or not it's important. We know it's important. We know things can come back and bite you in later years. And intellectually, they understand that. They hear the story about the football player losing the contract. They know this stuff. It's not that they're not listening. It's the level of importance, or like you said, that invincible is where the problem is. Yes, I know that girls can get lured into human trafficking, or that there can be problems at school later on with sexting. I know these things, but it's not going to happen to me. And that's the big part that requires the parental guidance and involvement and conversations to make sure that that goes the way it should go, instead of turning into a really bad disaster.
Thank you, Kevin, so much for providing us with the resources, your expertise, and knowledge base on so many different things. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you, and I hope that parents are able to walk away with feeling that much better equipped with respect to some of these services out there and softwares out there to help support them in really safeguarding their kids and making the online world a safe place for their kids. Further to that, I want to thank everyone for joining us through these webinars, Digital Parenting in the Age of COVID-19. It's been a real pleasure bringing you through these webinars and sharing some of our knowledge base with you. Please, by all means, access our website for hashtag Parenting Unplugged. And of course, thanks so much for tuning in and joining us on how to digital parent in the age of COVID-19.